Good morning, everyone. Is everyone here to talk about data? Excellent. Raise your hand if you're here to talk about data. Thank you. I want to go to our first slide, Fabian. La primera. So what's this data revolution that we're talking about? It's like the Matrix. We know it's happening. We don't really know what it is, but it's here and it's upon us. And it's a tool that we can use to help us solve some really complex problems. The new set of problems that we're facing in our cities. And to achieve everything that it strives for, we're going to need to be smart. We're going to need data. We're going to need to harness this data revolution that's happening. So what are we going to do this morning? What we were hoping to do is focus in a little bit on some of the problems for which data can help to solve in the urban context, and some of the tools that are available, including the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, which was launched a year ago and is working to present a number of tools that can be helpful in the urban context and to cities in advancing on sustainability goals. And we're going to get into that in a little bit more detail. We're going to talk about two specific challenges for which data is critical and that are facing our cities. And those are resilience to climate change and HIV/AIDS. We're also going to talk about some broader efforts to marshal tools and provide support for cities that are seeking to achieve sustainability and seeking to make the best use of data to their purposes. Finally, we're going to talk about different kinds of data. We have official statistics. We have big data. We have citizen-generated data. We have geospatial data. And the chief geographer from the Department of State is going to go into some detail toward the end of our session on a particular initiative in secondary cities, making use of citizen-generated participatory geospatial data. So we're going to be looking at themes and challenges and different kinds of data and how data can be harnessed and tools that are available for harnessing data for sustainable development. I understand our first speaker is a little bit delayed, so what I would like to do is start with a brief 5-minute video on the partnership I mentioned, the Global Partnership on Sustainable Development Data. So Fabian, please roll it, and I hope you all enjoy it. Multi-stakeholder initiatives working to harness the data revolution of sustainable development. The Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data is focused on making sure that the global goals, the global sustainable development goals, are realized. One of the major ways that those goals will actually have impact
global partnership for sustainable development matter by joining forces to strengthen political commitment, align action, foster collaboration, spur innovation, and build trust in the booming data ecosystems of the 21st century.
The partnership is committed to supporting our partners in national and subnational organizations to get the best possible resources that will help them chart their own pathways. One way we're trying to do this is through developing and supporting country data roadmaps for sustainability. One of the early priorities and contributions of the global partnership is to develop with our partners all over the world a toolbox that will support country-led efforts at the national and subnational level to harness the data revolution and achieve.
The toolbox will actually bring together different stakeholders in the planning of the toolbox and the global partnership. The partners are coming from different areas. They are within national offices, the civil society, private sector as well. So the toolbox will put together the inputs of these various stakeholders.
So there you have it, folks. That's a little bit of background on the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development. Like I said, it was launched just a year ago, and just in the last 2 weeks hired its permanent executive director. But in its year of infancy, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data has grown to more than 150 partners from the private sector, NGO community, international organizations, and government. And it's done some very interesting things that I would like to make you all aware of. You heard discussion on video about the data roadmap concept and the toolbox that the partnership has generated on data roadmaps. I don't know if this mic is keeps going in and out. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. The toolbox is on the Data Partnerships website. It's a multiple toolbox and a work in progress. That's just is it working? Okay. There are multiple modules. There is an urban module in development. So as initially conceived, the toolbox targeted toward national governments, and there are a number of countries that have committed to and started a process of doing roadmaps on data for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. But the concept is completely adaptable and usable at the municipal level and at the subnational level. So in the coming year or so, the partnerships engage cities as well as countries in the use of this toolbox and roadmap concept. The concept is very simple. It's a planning tool. About what can you do as to engage stakeholders in jointly identifying what data do you have that corresponds to your sustainability goals. What do you lack? What capacity do you have? What capacity do you lack? And what are your needs? And how are you going to get from point A to point B? Planning and setting forth a roadmap to go from point A to point B. There's a flyer out on the table about the data roadmaps and the toolbox, and I encourage folks to take a look at it. It is a work in progress, but it is a crowdsourced work in progress, so everybody can make contributions to developing this tool for both urban and subnational and national level planning for identifying and meeting data needs for sustainability in a way that engages stakeholders and involves everybody that's interested. There's a second initiative that the partnership has launched that I wanted to make folks aware of. It was not touched on in the video because it was really just launched in September at the United Nations General Assembly, and that is a marketplace. The partnership is taking a market approach, identifying needs and gaps both on the supply side and the demand side. You can think of the toolbox as a demand side tool. How does the data user, government, subnational, national, other stakeholders make use of data? On the supply side, the partnership is working to build collaboratives in a number of thematic areas where there are gaps in available data and available capacity. But the marketplace is an online tool for linking supply and demand. So it is perfectly adaptable and usable for the local level. So I wanted to make folks aware that one of the things that the partnership is trying to do is build a global ecosystem and nurture, not just build it on its own, but it's a partnership. It's a joint effort amongst now well over 150 partners to nurture this global ecosystem of meeting the supply side and the demand side and connecting supply and demand on enhancing the availability and the utility of data from the full range of sources available to help meet sustainability needs at all levels, local, regional, and national, as well as global. I think we're still waiting for Madame. So I would like to introduce a very special guest, Doctora Alicia Bárcena, the Executive Director of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. And we are just so honored and pleased that you could join us this morning. And in general, Dr. Bárcena and ECLAC is a phenomenal partner in the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, and a phenomenal partner on many of the thematic issues that I mentioned. We're going to hear just after she talks a little bit more about climate resilience, and we've been working together on harnessing data for climate resilience. So without more, and Dr. Bárcena, I know you've just arrived in a rush from another meeting, but I'm going to turn the mic over to you and ask you to give us a few remarks.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. I'm very sorry, but I was lost in the building. I needed like big data sort of approach. Anyway, let me tell you that we have done a tremendous partnership actually, we are having a partnership with the U.S. Department of State and the White House Office of Science and Technology. And we launched this initiative in New York. And it's an initiative of big data. How do we harness big data for different purposes? One of them, of course, is climate change and how to build resilience. And also how to put this at the service of people. At the end of the day, what we need is that big data today be at the service of the people. We, the people, are the ones who are providing information to the great, let's say, companies over the top, the OTTs. We are providing them with information. So what we want now is to see how we can use that information, that aggregation of volumes of data, which is big data at the end of the day. How can we use it for the purpose of helping people? Helping people how? For example, in earthquakes, in natural disasters, in ways that people need to know in advance and be prepared and save their lives, actually. For example, we know that many of this information can be put in the hands of people through, for example, in Latin America and the Caribbean. The mobile that people have exceed the number of people. For example, in Peru, there are more mobile phones than people, actually. People have more than 1 or 2 mobile phones, and it has been a real difference for them because they have access to prices, for example, coffee prices, corn prices. People in the rural areas have access through mobile phones. But now I think we need to go to a next step. At least in a region like mine, we need to make business work for this purpose and put broadband with better quality of broadband accessible for everyone. We believe that broadband should be a public good, which means that I don't mean it to be free. Probably we will have to pay something, but broadband has to get to every single person. And broadband is going to make the difference because it has to be fixed lines. It's not by mobile phones and mobility, and intelligent telephones can give you some information indeed, but we need to elevate the quality of the connectivity. So, and to elevate the quality of connectivity, we are going to need broadband that is going to be constructed through the infrastructure. So, for example, in Central America, we have a project of electricity integration. So, that project is going to incorporate the broadband. And this is going to make a whole difference. And then the phone companies, they know that through the cables, there is one cable that we call la fibra oscura, the black fiber, which is free. For example, Chile got for free one part of the broadband for the telescope that is in the Paranal, as you know. The largest telescopes in the world are precisely in Chile. So, but the universities, the academia now has access to this broadband of excellent quality. And we need that because the Internet of Things, because the big data has to allow us to get into good quality information. So this is what I wanted to tell you. We have this partnership with the US. We are inviting governments and organizations to join us. Why? Because we believe that in the climate change perspective, I was just having breakfast this morning with the mayor of Mexico City. And we were discussing how can we make available to the 20 million people that live in Mexico City, availability of broadband, availability of internet connections, so big data can be for them in the case of flooding, in the case of earthquakes, in the case of how can they search for help when there is a humanitarian emergency. So this is what we think we can do. This is the way we are working. We are making partnerships also for another issue that I think is of great importance, which is open government. That is, the data has to be in open formats and has to be accessible and available for everybody. This is the only thing that is going to give us transparency. And in the case of ECLAC, we are negotiating a treaty with the member states, the 33 member states. We have now 18 member states signed on, with civil society participating altogether in what we call Principle 10, which is access to information, access to justice, and access to participation. So we hope that all of you will be part of this. And finally, just to end my intervention, is that I believe that the cities, and that's why we are here, we need good data. And we know that some foundations, we had yesterday a meeting with the foundations, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, Avena Foundation, all of them are interested in pulling together good information, good data that could be reliable for people to follow up on something that we believe very much on, which is Agenda 2030, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, which is also one of the most important things we have today on climate change. And for that, we need indicators, we need data, and that data can not only be provided by the National Institutes of Statistics, we need big data companies to join. So thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you, and my apologies for being late, but I hope it was worth it. Thank you very much.
Doctora Bárcena, estamos muy agradecidos por su partnership y su participación hoy. Muchas gracias. As we call our climate resilience panel to the stage, let me just pick up on one comment that Doctora Bárcena made about open government and the relationship between data and open government. Yes, data needs to be open as much as possible. And so the U.S. government has adopted a policy of open by default. That doesn't mean everything's open. There are reasons that some things are not open, but open by default is our policy. We are also participants in, along with many other countries that are represented here, I'm sure this morning, of the Open Government Partnership. It has 70 countries participating, and it's an effort in which countries make commitments to greater transparency, accountability, and citizen participation, and a lot of that is done by open data platforms. So the link between open data and transparency, accountability, good government, and sustainable development is inextricable. We're going to talk now about climate resilience and a particular initiative that Dr. Bárcena alluded to, a joint declaration that we're inviting cities to sign on to. We have a number of countries that are participating. But this effort is going to culminate in December at the Global Summit of the Open Government Partnership, where we hope to really put a lot of emphasis on the role of climate resilience, data, open, transparent, participatory. So we're going from New York, the UN General Assembly, to Quito, to Marrakesh, the climate conference of the parties, and then to Paris, trying to build momentum on harnessing the data revolution for climate resilience. I'm going to turn it over, and I apologize, I didn't properly introduce myself. Larry Sperling, U.S. Department of State. I have the honor to work on a team that's called the Data Revolution Team. So I'm excited about being a revolutionary at the Department of State. I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Salkin, who is the Executive Vice President of the 100 Resilient Cities program, and invite our other panelists to come to the stage.
Thank you, Larry. Panel want to come up? Let's get up here. So I was told we have a very tight time frame, so I'm going to make sure I'm timing ourselves. The panelists will have to give amazing information very quickly, but I think we'll do a great job. Tom, you're here. We have 4 seats, so let's get that going. So at 100 Resilient Cities, we're working with 100 cities around the world, helping them at the local level build that capacity to begin to tackle their challenges. And one of the things that we work on when we work on with resilience is really the system of systems model, this idea that it's about the whole urban space, the people, the organizations of the city, the place of the city, the leadership, and the knowledge. And within that work, it's going to be critical to leverage data and share that data across those different systems to make it meaningful. I think you just heard from the 2 introductory speakers and from the video how absolutely exciting the world and the revolution of data can be. But speaking from experience of working 16 years in a local government, working with the data to make decisions on a day-to-day basis in your day-to-day job at the local level is super complex. And we're really fortunate today to have a great panel that's going to help us talk about data. And the way I was thinking about it is, it's not just how the data is used to succeed in achieving the SDGs, but it's about leveraging data from one sector to link to another sector, linking that data together to help the decision makers making decisions, and then taking that data and bringing it to the local community in a meaningful way so they can use the data to help be informed and make decisions as well. It's about driving the economy, it's about driving decision making, and it's about driving transparency, among many other things. We're really fortunate to have a great panel. I'll introduce them very quickly, and then we'll go through their presentations. But I'm immediately joined right here by Daniela Voto, and she joins us from the WRI, the World Resource Institute. There, she is a World Governance Manager, and she's working on really exciting work in Brazil, and she's going to share her experiences in Porto Alegre, as well as other places, highlighting PrEP, right? The Partnership for Resilience and Preparedness. I'm also joined by Hans Ganels, and Hans is at Deltares, and he oversees their management in sustainable cities as well as water management. He's an expert advisor for those fields. And they've done some really amazing work leveraging information and data to help Mexico City solve some of the most challenging water problems, as well as other exciting pieces. And I'm also joined by Tom Bailey. Tom works at C40. He's the head of research. And C40 is one of the premier institutions working in the world with local government, collecting information, and he's going to share some of their new endeavors to leverage this data to help cities understand their adaptation challenges and begin to make movements into making their cities more adaptive. All of them are great partners of 100 Resilient Cities, their organizations, and I'm just thrilled to be here on this panel. Maybe I'll sit in the middle so we don't look so odd. But Daniela, do you want to start us off?
Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming, and I'd like to thank the organization for having me here, for inviting us. I'd like to start, we have like 5 minutes, so have to keep it. Hi, my name is Daniele, and I live in Porto Alegre. It's a city located in the southern part of Brazil. It's nearby Argentina and Uruguay. So I'm here to talk today about Porto Alegre and the Climate Partnership for Resilience and Preparedness, PrEP. So, this way? Which way? Okay. The PrEP started now in September this year, and it's a public and private collaboration between government, agencies, civil society organizations, local governments, and federal and national governments. So what we wanted to accomplish with that, we wanted to have dashboards with components that cities and citizens everywhere can use it to have better data and to know how to invest, to be prepared, to mitigate, and to adapt to several possibilities that now we have ahead of us, that they are already happening, actually. But it's hard sometimes to see things like that and to say, okay, especially in Brazil, we don't have this kind of culture of data and collecting data and, indicators. In Brazil, it's quite new for us. So why should Porto Alegre, a city like 1.5 million inhabitants, pretty well known for participatory budgeting experiences and the World Social Forum, why should it be part of PrEP? Well, I'd like to give you an example. Porto Alegre has some urban challenges. Some of them are pretty new, some of them are not so new, so we have some difficulties to face that and to change these realities. So in Porto Alegre we have some occupations. Now we have 11 risk areas in Porto Alegre, and we have to take care of that because we have problems with landslides and floodings. Every single year we have this kind of problem. So it's not a disaster, it's not an emergency, it's something that happens every single year. So we have to be prepared for that. And other problems like climate changing. We have been facing some challenges now in Porto Alegre regarding real extreme storms all of a sudden. Right now we are facing that right now. For 3 days now it's been raining in Porto Alegre like never before. So, and the lack of communication between the local government and the other levels of government. Brazil is divided into the national, state, and local level. So, yeah. That's what happened. January 29 this year, PrEP was not online yet. Porto Alegre had, in around 11 p.m., we had this explosion in the city. 11 p.m. in the downtown area, some kind of wind came and like this. It was like, I'm a lawyer, I'm not an environmental expert. So the experts explained that it was a phenomenon named microburst. It's really an explosion of wind that comes and goes. And it's kind of very difficult to predict it. What happened? We have 3,000 trees completely damaged, over 300 trees completely destroyed, all the parks of the city, and we have lots of parks there, completely destroyed. 1 week without water, electricity, and any kind of communications, any kind. The day after that, we were around the city walking, everyone, and, pardon me, but it looked like the zombie land. When we see those movies of zombies, we were like that. So maybe if we had PrEP online on that time, we could be able to predict that. Why? Because after 2 weeks, when we start recovering, the City Hall started asking questions to the federal government. How come the federal system, because in Brasilia, our DC, our capital, we have a huge institute only for this kind of thing, to observe and predict problems like that. So prevent disasters. How come we didn't know about it? Well, okay, thank you. This way. What happened is that they knew about it. The federal government, in the federal level, in Brasilia, they knew 4 hours in advance that this microburst was going to happen. But due to bureaucracy, they were not able to call the mayor because they didn't have the power to call the mayor. They have to go through all the levels of bureaucracy. So we never got information. Can you imagine that? I don't know how we didn't lose any life there. Nobody died. I don't know how. We don't know how. But, So imagine if we have PrEP. We will be able to see that in advance. We would not be only relying on national information. So that's what PrEP is about. We believe that can be and it's going to be a huge tool for cities and citizens everywhere. And that's why we'd like to invite all the cities and citizens to join PrEP and to see this as an opportunity to have open data with high level of quality. It's impressive the level of quality it has. And as you can see, we are already there. So now we have the risk areas in the map. We know where they are, and we know about the rains. And the mayor, everybody, the citizens, they all can really rely on the information and not only be waiting for the federal government to give us information. So I hope I have a little time, but I hope you could have just a glance of what I'm talking about. And please join us at wri.org and also at PrEP. Thank you.
It's great. I think C40 is next. I think it's really interesting, right? The idea, as we heard earlier, how the power of cell phone data is really critical. But sometimes in cities and at the local level, you don't need the big data of cell phones. You just actually need to use the cell phone to make a phone call. So sometimes it's not the big data. It's just using technology for what it's meant for. Very interesting. C40.
Thank you very much. Going on to my... Oh, it's up there. Yep, great. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me here today. My name is Tom Bailey. I'm Head of Research at C40. So we've been asked to talk a bit about data and adaptation. So my background and the work we've been doing mostly for the last decade has been mostly around mitigation. As we'll get into, we're getting a lot more into adaptation. And a colleague of mine heads up our adaptation department who wasn't able to come, but hopefully, given we're not too siloed, I'll be able to represent some of the great work that they're doing over there. But just firstly, C40, we're a network of 86, hoping to level out around 100 mayors of the world's biggest cities. So it's a political network of mayors come together to take action on climate change. We represent about it's actually now 600 million people and a quarter of the world's GDP. So that's a massive constituency we represent here. And we have a very sort of particular model which we've been using for the last 10 years, which has been a great success, which is the idea that the best teacher for a mayor is another mayor. The best way for cities to be able to take action is through collaboration and through sharing of best practice and through a very evidence-based approach. Given that's our mandate, we have a quite particular remit on data. We need to be on the mitigation and adaptation front. We've only got a few years to be able to take the kind of action we need. To meet the Paris Agreement, we've got 4 or 5 years left to be able to take the action that will put us on that carbon trajectory. So we don't have time to wait for 20 years to get the absolutely perfect evidence base. We need to be taking action today, and we need to do the best we can to collect whatever evidence we can to inform that. But then at the same time, we want to make sure that over time, we're establishing an evidence base which allows us to go really into the detail and to really refine things. So we have that dual challenge, which is something that will come up in this a little bit. Next slide. So although we focused on mitigation historically mostly, our cities are now absolutely almost unilateral in telling us that adaptation is something that we have to focus on. 98% of our cities, and this is reported by the cities themselves, 98% of them say that they are at risk from climate adaptation and climate change in the future, and therefore need to adapt. And 70% of them, 70%, say that they are already experiencing the impacts of climate change. So we've got a very clear mandate to get into this space now. And just before I get into the data, there's 2 main conclusions that we can bring forward from the mitigation work we've been doing. And first of all, that collecting data universally that's reliable across all our cities is extremely difficult. It's taken years. Our cities have to get very much involved. It's a lot of resource on their part. And the other point is that standardization is absolutely critical. Because if everyone measures things slightly differently, then it's impossible to spot trends. It's impossible to be able to say to one city, well, there's another city that's like yours, you can learn from them. So these are the 2 really important things for us in terms of going forward on data. And so what from the mitigation point of view, a few years ago, when we got into this, we were thinking, well, how can we help our cities take action on mitigation? Well, first of all, you need to be able to measure what your outcome is. So carbon emissions. You need to be able to measure the background conditions that would enable action. So things like city power or city wealth or whatever. And then also you need to be able to measure action. So what is climate action? What groups does it fall into? How do you measure the scale it's getting to? How do you measure how much it costs? Measure how it's being taken. And so we're kind of applying a similar approach here for our craft. It's called CRAFT. I don't actually know what CRAFT stands for, strangely, but it's a framework that allows us to measure these things, but from an adaptation point of view. So profiling the city in terms of how empowered they are to act. The second point on there, understanding the problem, I'll come on to it again in a minute. This is one of the key innovations here. Like, how do you measure hazards? How do you measure risks? How do you quantify them? And how do you allow that, build that into your thinking and your planning going forward? And then crucially, planning. Which of our cities have taken action, have developed a plan? How extensive is it? Which sectors does it include? Which stakeholders have they engaged in? And so by developing this framework and then asking our cities to fill it out and collecting data in this unified way, we can start to understand that landscape and start to guide our cities in terms of where they need to be going, guide funders, guide our wider stakeholder communities, nations, friends and researchers into where they need to be focusing their action on this. Ooh. Oh, no. Okay, where am I going? Oh, thank you. Okay, so but that slide that I'm getting to is going to show you a little bit about this framework on hazards. Okay, well, this was meant to build up, so you can see the strip in the middle. That's meant to sort of jump up as a, sort of jump up after, and so we can see the bit behind. But basically, what this is, it's a standardised way of measuring what the different risks are to cities. So you've got meteorological risks, geophysical risks, biological ones, a list of about 6 or 7, and then within those, you've got subcategories of what the other risks, individual hazards are. So, for instance, heavy snow, rainstorms, and what effect that has on people within our cities. And we measure that by we ask our cities, what is the probability of this thing happening and what is the severity? And you have the severity times the risk, severity times the probability tells you how much the risk, how risky it is. And then that allows us to do this thing in the middle here, where you can go back to a city and say, look, this is your graph of what the things, the big risks that you're going to be exposed to, and therefore the things you might want to focus on going forward. And this is completely different for different cities around the world. So it's really important they do this before they even start thinking about how to approach the problem. And then it also allows you to map out what other cities are that are similar to you. So you've got this map there. And that's super helpful, because then cities can go, okay, well, Bogota had the same problem, they did this, X, Y, Z, and it was extremely impactful for them and beneficial, so how can I learn from them? And just very quickly, how do we actually make our cities collect all this data? I said it's really hard. So we actually require, as part of our membership, cities to fill out online questionnaire and what action they're taking, but now as part of the Compact of Mayors and now Covenant of Mayors, which includes C40 cities, but increasingly many cities from all over the world, which are coming together to sort of make a collective statement about their ambition on climate change and how they're going to take action. In signing up to this, the cities commit to a process by which they deepen the work they're doing, the data they provide, and the level of commitment they're making. And as we go down here, it's got, the bottom one says what they have to do on adaptation. So straight in the first year, just make a commitment to address the risk. Then to report on the hazards, which was the slides I just saw. Then in year 3 to start to assess the vulnerability, and then by year 2, and then by year 3 to be actually taking action and delivering an action plan on it. And as this grows every year and year, more and more cities join. They're all collecting this data in the same way, committing to working with each other. We're getting a serious groundswell of understanding and sort of decisive action on this. And I don't think I've got time to go through that one. So thank you very much, and I look forward to any questions later.
Thank you for sharing the work that C40 and with the Compact of Mayor and using the craft tool, but to really create a standard in which cities can leverage and really grow their data understanding and comparative data is so critical. But you kept mentioning how hard it is. I think it's great that both you and the Compact of Mayors get the mayors on board, because you need to get a whole city behind this data collection effort. But I also think, it needs to work, and we don't have enough time, as you said, so it'll be exciting to see how this plays out, and I know we're excited to work with you on that. Finally, Hans is going to get into good old flooding and understanding flooding and data and how to use that to better manage our cities.
Thank you very much. Yes, let me see if I can see my own presentation. 1 second. Let me start anyway. I'm a hydrologist and not a data scientist, but at Deltares, where I work, yes? Baltimore, Maryland. So this is probably another presentation. San Jose, New York City. interesting. But I wouldn't know what to tell about it. Anyway, at Deltares, one of the actual spear points, if that is correct English, speerpunten in Dutch, is actually data science, so to say. So we try to use open data from all sorts to use it in our studies on urban water management, flood risk management, water security studies, groundwater, and others. Yes? My 5 minutes still have to start. Yes, climate resilience and urban water management. And I just wanted to give you a few examples of how we use open and not so open data. So, well, Deltares is an independent institute in the Netherlands for applied research in the field of water, subsurface and infrastructure. And this is one data source that is perhaps, well, most valuable for each water-related study, ground elevation. So fortunately, all sorts of ground elevation data are available to date. And well, the most detailed type of data today is probably LiDAR, and it is of course of great use in many flooding studies. However, LiDAR is still quite expensive, and so it is not available everywhere in the world. There are many countries, many cities, many locations where you cannot use LiDAR data simply because the budget is not available to acquire those data. This is another example of OpenStreetMaps. You probably know it. And this is a really nice example we were involved in Dar es Salaam. On the left-hand side, you see a topographical map of Dar es Salaam. And on the right-hand side, you see the result of a project that has taken place in Dar es Salaam, where people from the city, local citizens, got together and collected all sorts of information about building footprint, ground height, thresholds of buildings, the exact locations of channels, locations of viaducts, and whether or not water is able to flow below that viaduct. And well, this map is the result of that, but this makes it easier. Hey, let me see what happens here. I have a slide here that shows the results of the collection of those data. So this is now a map showing ground elevation plus threshold elevation of each building footprint plus the exact trajectories of channels, rivers, culverts, what have you, roads. And this is an ideal basis to use in flood mapping, and it is open data, it is freely available and without cost of acquiring those data. Just a few other examples using freely available data. This is a tool that uses good old Landsat data, and it collects all the Landsat images of one location, and then you can use the tool to see the land and water location change over time. So here you can see, this is for example a piece of China, and here you see where land reclamation has taken place in China, in that location. You can also see how patterns of rivers change in time, and it is on the website, and you can use it for spatial planning, for example. I have to move in that direction, I believe, with this apparatus. This is another useful tool making use of freely available open data. Global Flood Analyzer. It shows river flooding worldwide on the basis of a global flooding simulation model, and on the basis of ground elevation data and some other sources of data that are freely available. And it gives you information on the river basin scale, also on cost of damage as a result of floods of a specific return time. And it more and more also contains information of specific cities on a certain scale. And we developed this. This is part of Aqueduct, and we developed this with World Resources Institute. I am very busy working in Colombo on a flood risk management study, and hopefully this video starts moving. But if it doesn't, well, it's not a problem. But here we have combined building footprint and the calculation of flooding in a specific region of the city of Colombo. And if you look at the video, you see the entire city, and you see exactly where flooding takes place and where you are still safe to be evacuated, for example. So on this slide, the refineries of a petroleum company, and so in this way you see all sorts of details. And this has been quite a lot of work to acquire those data. This is a World Bank funded project, and the World Bank is really funding this data acquisition on, with the requirement, of course, that the data will become freely available. So this also, all the data goes into OpenStreetMaps and will be available for later studies. And this is also a really nice tool developed by the World Bank. It's called GeoNode, and we upload all the information from this project into this GeoNode web-based database. And, we call it Flood Risk Assessment for Colombo Metropolitan Region. But this tool is available for many cities in which those data become available. We are now in the process of starting a study in Mexico City together with Adriana Chavez, right here in the first row. And we have made our first steps. This is again ground elevation data, and we looked at the water system and tried to see where the flooding takes place in that water system. Just a few last remarks. In our work, we experience that our work changes, in fact. So on the left-hand side, you see a sort of schematic model of how researchers or consultants or scientists used to work. They receive some data, they use a model, they work in their office, and then when they are totally finished, they deliver a report, and then they say, well, this is the end result, here's your hazard map. But we more and more move to a situation where we have a more circular way of modeling and a more interactive way of modeling, with communities collecting data, with all sorts of agencies collecting data, and we are part of that circle of that spiral of working around, so to say. I have to move to that side. And then finally, trends with a question mark. So we go from, say, passive to interactive. I just explained that. We also go from local and handmade databases of locally acquired data to more global and automated databases. We go from scarce and ad hoc available data to full coverage of your area with mostly remote sensing data, of course. We go from data collected by the authority, by the city government or the national government, to the crowd, so to say. Think of OpenStreetMaps. And we go from topic specialists who know everything and who have the right answer to data scientists who more interactively work together with all sorts of specialists and non-specialists. And I now realize I forgot one nice slide about Jakarta, in which we use Twitter to map flooding, which is also a really nice open data source that can be used for that purpose. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we're just about at time, and I was hoping to have a little bit of time for Q&A, but we're going to have to move on. I just wanted to highlight something that Larry mentioned earlier, and I don't know if people caught it, but it's the joint declaration on harnessing the data revolution for climate resilience. So this is a declaration in which basically we all come together. It has 17 countries so far, 3 local cities, and many, many global companies are partnering on this. But the idea here is let's make data available at local, regional, and national levels for good decision making. But I think what I want you all to think about, and it's, how amazing were those Deltares tools, and how great is Craft and the work that C40 is doing to be able to do the right kind of work that was happening with WRI in Porto Alegre. But if you think about it, we need that data, and the data is held by all of us. We all have some piece of data, whether as individuals with our cell phones, or members of government, or members of a higher government, and how do we work together to really make this data available so that we can have these amazing tools that allow data scientists to do really interesting complex modeling, that allow decision makers to make great decisions and invest the money wisely that the cities don't have enough of, and to help residents understand the transparency and be part of the decision making of their communities. So maybe all of you are interested in signing on, being a part of that. I know Larry wants to sign everyone up here today. There might even be a sign-up booth out front. I don't know. But with that, I want to thank our panel for showing us a little bit of how complex it is, but also how exciting it can be, and the hard work that is ahead, but the hard work that's already happening. So thank you very much. Please join me.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and everyone. What an amazing discussion and exciting conversation. Some really interesting stuff. I want to invite Dina and Malika to come up and join for the next panel. So this next panel, I talked a little bit about the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data and what the partnership is doing with the support of its 150 or so partners to nurture a global ecosystem. Well, here this morning, we've got 2 of the anchor partners of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, Development Gateway and the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and they're both working vigorously at the urban level, at the city level. So we want to hear from them a little bit of detail about their initiatives that are happening at the local level. So let me introduce, we have Malika Edquist, who is manager from the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and Dina Abdel Fattah, senior associate from Development Gateway. As moderator, I will put the first question to Malika to hopefully start off and spice up her conversation. So Malika, UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network has been working with some UN cities on some initiatives dealing with mapping of data availability and gaps with respect to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals from the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Tell us about your efforts and what you've learned so far and where this initiative is going.
Great. Thank you very much, Larry, for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. Actually, can we go back to the presentation that you already saw a little bit of before, the SDSN presentation? To answer the question, I would first like to introduce myself and introduce the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. So we are a global network of institutions from universities to think tanks to for-profit and not-for-profit organizations who are all working on sustainable development solutions, trying to uncover the pathways that we can actually take to get to 2030. The idea is we don't always need to reinvent the wheel. There are amazing ideas out there. Innovation is important. but it isn't everything. And more important than innovation is often collaboration, and that is what SDSN is all about. So we started with working at the national level and integrating the Sustainable Development Goals at the national level. But as we know that cities are the point of implementation, we are trying as best as possible to find ways that we can empower cities themselves to make progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. So SDSN, as Larry said, is an anchor partner with the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. And the Global Partnership has been working on national roadmaps, working national statistical organizations. Working with the national statistical organizations to define what the indicators are with their national level statistics. SDSN has taken that to the city level in the United States with 3 specific cities: New York City, where I live, Maryland, which is on the East Coast near Washington, D.C., and San Jose, California.
Sure. Yeah. So what we figured out, the mic going in and out, we think it's working when you're leaning this way and going out, maybe when you move in this direction. I don't know. Try it.
Great. So San Jose, California is near Silicon Valley. They were very familiar with the idea of data driving development. New York City is the home of the UN General Assembly every year. They're very familiar as well with the concept of the Sustainable Development Goals, the concept of sustainable development in general. So the idea of mapping their One NYC plan to the Sustainable Development Goals was very easy. Baltimore, Maryland is a different case. They, like many American cities, have a little bit of, oh great, so I'm going to be talking about the USA Sustainable Cities Initiative. And so this is Baltimore, Maryland, which I'm talking about right now. In Baltimore, they're a little bit skeptical about global institutions like the UN, but the evidence of what the SDGs could do for them to supplement their national or their city plan was very, very clear from the get-go. So the idea was, how do we bring people from places like Baltimore on board and make it into something participatory, not handed down from an international institution to a national level where they signed up, but really make it make sense for the people of Baltimore. So we had a lot of buy-in from local universities, from the mayor's offices, but one of the first things that we had to do when we got to Baltimore was to localize the goals. We had to think of not just the global goals, but the Baltimore goals. How do we relate all of the sustainable development goals to the problems that Baltimoreans are facing every day, from issues of social inclusion to issues of police misconduct, things that are really pressing on their minds. So what we did is we took the sustainable development goals and readapted them for Baltimore. And this worked really, really well there. New York, they had already done their own mapping exercise. They had an inclusive city plan, One NYC. They were able to very clearly make the connections. And in San Jose, they just went straight to the data, and they're building a dynamic portal, a platform that is going to be constantly updating to be able to monitor the SDGs in San Jose. So we know that there is a crowded field of data and standards. We know that there's a lot of data that these cities are having to produce. The question was really, what is the value add of the Sustainable Development Goals to each of these cities? And the way that we were able to do that was really by leaning into the data, thinking about the indicators themselves. So in Baltimore, what this meant was we had an inclusive participatory process among different cities, where we had an ability for people to come and to look at the specific indicators for each, the specific targets for each of the goals, and determine whether or not that was the right target to be measuring for their city. And this was an ability for us to get people involved, to get them to really understand and to really own the goals. And so data is often thought of as a dry tool. It's a data point, it's a piece of information, but it's a decision point, and it's also an invitation for you to pay attention. It's an invitation for you to not think, what am I counting, but why and for whom am I counting? So that's something that this process allowed us to do in Baltimore. So we created a checklist for local SDG indicators because what works at the local level is not the same as what works at the national level. Well, we wanted it to be aligned with the global targets, but you have to make it really aligned with local priorities as well if you're going to get anyone involved. You have to be able to fit in with an existing process, the existing data collection. You don't want to overburden city governments. And you want it to be publicly available because we really believe in open data. And you need to be able to track it and make sure that there is actionable outcomes, that it makes sense in the long run because this is, after all, a medium-term agenda. And finally, just as we talk about disaggregating data from the national level to the subnational level to actually make sure that we're leaving no one behind, to leave no one and no place behind within a city is equally as important. So we wanted to make sure that the data that we were collecting was disaggregated by race, by gender, income, and neighborhood. And that's tricky to do, but it allows you to see what's happening within a city, not just at the city level, at the averages, which can hide what's actually happening. So what I would like to do is to leave you with an invitation to check out our SDG Cities Guide, a Getting Started Guide for cities that's based off of the experiences of these 3 USA cities, as well as Brazil. And we know other cities are coming online all the time. We just had a presentation in Bogota with Bogota and Medellin, who've also done this own mapping. We're interested to hear other cities' experiences because we know that the questions that we have that are lingering may not be the questions that other people have. We want to know, how do you incorporate SDGs into a data smart program? We're constantly updating. How do you make sure that these bespoke city plans that make sense for a specific city can relate out? So these are questions that we're continually asking, and we know that they're not always the same challenges in a place like the United States as our friends at Development Gateway are currently finding through their work and other geographies. Thanks.
Malika, thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Dina with this question. So Dina Abdel Fattah from Development Gateway, both UN, SDS, and Development Gateway, great partners with the Global Partnership. Dina, in the context of increasing pressures due to urbanization and environmental shocks on cities, particularly on smaller cities in Africa, what role does data play in helping cities face these challenges more confidently and proactively?
Great, thank you, Larry. Let's try it out with this new microphone. Great. So I really want to keep this short because I think there's a lot of probably interest to talk about questions and how both myself and Malika are working in this realm. So what I'll do is kind of walk through. Oh, thanks. What I'll do is I'll walk through our work on the toolkit and kind of describe more about what the vision is, how we've implemented it, and more importantly, really where we want to take it from here. So basically, I'll frame the discussion, I'll talk about what we've been doing, but I really invite everyone to think about how does this apply to my work or to my interests, and we'd love to hear from you on that. So to begin, quick show of hands, has anyone heard of Development Gateway before? Just raise your hand if you have. Excellent. So we're not unfamiliar to everyone. But essentially, we are a tech provider. We build solutions, we build technology to help make data and decisions a lot more easily and actionable for both national governments and cities, but also citizens. But increasingly, in this world of increasing tech and data, as Malika had pointed out, it's not just really anymore about the solutions, but also about the processes that come along with that. So what does it mean to use technology? What does it mean to use data? And sometimes we start with the end goal. We focus on the technology or the data, but how can we actually work on the process? So Development Gateway in recent years has really been trying to bring that ball back to the core of requirements and understanding so that we can actually build a better technology and solutions where they are needed or where they are fit to be. But it doesn't mean that it's always going to be the case. So this toolkit is really a great example of one of our works of really stepping back and trying to understand what the problems are on the context and on the ground with regards to how cities use data, but also more importantly, what is the potential to use data. And we really frame this in the context now of sub-Saharan Africa. So as Malika has mentioned, SDN's work has been on United States cities with impact to grow outward. We've been focusing on Africa with hopefully more ramifications to look at the global south, but also the global north as well. And I think we really framed this under the Cities Alliance banner, who funded this project under the auspices of DFID for the Future Cities Africa project, which aims to future-proof cities in Africa, meaning are cities going to become more resilient? Will they be able to meet shocks when they come up? Will they be able to be proactive and retroactive? And that's really what we're looking at, is in this increasing urbanization, where most of the continent will be urban by 2030, which is very much in our own time frame. What are we doing to make sure that resiliency isn't an afterthought, but actually part of city planning? And, of course, when we talk about funded projects and visions, a lot of times it's an idea, but how does that actually implement onto the ground? So our work was grounded in really talking first with the recipients and the beneficiaries, in this case cities, and trying to understand, is this something you want? Is this something you need? And we've done work in Ghana, Uganda, Mozambique, and Ethiopia, and across the board, there is a clear need for where do we start with data? We know that data is important, but having not had the experience with data, where do we go from there? So what's interesting about this toolkit, and I'll kind of run through the process, but again, interested to talk more about your vision and your ideas, is that it really provides the bare minimum indicators. We have the SDGs, we have other agendas, for example, like the Africa 2060 agenda, I believe, but it's more about where do we actually start with data and their build up versus what is our goal and work backwards. I think a lot of times it's a lot easier to start with this is what we all need to do and there we can become better at it versus working the other way around. And this is really what the toolkit works to do. If you're what we term data desert cities to data capable cities, what is the bare standard and minimum across the board that cities can use to know about what data sources they need for planning? And, we talked about technology and how the importance of that as perhaps a driver and vehicle of change, but we've really started it as something very low tech. Currently it's an Excel toolkit, so officials can use it regardless of what their data infrastructure is or technology infrastructure. And from there, as the need develops, as people become more comfortable, we can build other sources, but really starting with what's comfortable and really making that process the focus of what we've been working on. So essentially, the toolkit serves as a very detailed manual for looking at the whole ecosystem of data, all from the basic indicators that a city needs to collect, just bare minimum for kind of what you need to function for a planning purpose, also to what you can do for more advanced purposes, and looking at really what can we do to constantly assess our state of data maturity to then provide the optimal approaches, and more importantly, how do we define success? So we have 3 assessments that cities can do iteratively that focus on data quality, on structural assessments, and also the enabling environment, because a lot of times when we talk about data, the context really, really matters and shapes everything. So if we're looking at data in the context of a city that it doesn't have in the country a Right to Information Act, it's going to be terribly hard to share information without those kind of legislation there. So being pragmatic and practical is really important as well when we talk about what we can do with data. So essentially the vision is take those assessments for a city, look at it from kind of the buy-in, look at it from the perspective of what can we do then to implement these changes that are necessary, work on those changes, and then come back and assess it all over again. So really creating that ecosystem and life cycle. So next steps is we've developed this methodology. It's been implemented and talked about across the board with a number of different stakeholders, both within cities, international organizations, and so forth. But we're really looking now, kind of what you've been doing with your work, is to now roll it out and see how it really matches up to needs on the ground. And that's really where we can leave it for questions. Thanks very much.
Fantastic. We don't have a lot of time for questions, and I'm sorry about that, but maybe let's take time. Is there 1 or 2 questions from the audience? If not, I would suggest we move on. Thank you so much. So, Dina and Malika, you can see we've moved from some general discussion of the global ecosystem of data and how cities can tap into it to a more specific discussion of specific challenge, climate resilience, and now to, back to kind of some more general, how can initiatives like those of UNSDSN and Development Gateway support efforts at the urban level, at the municipal level, to tap into data and make it actionable for decision making to drive sustainability. So, phenomenal work and keep it up. Thank you so much. Want to move back now to a more specific challenge, and that is a really heartbreaking challenge that we've been facing in the world, and we've made some progress, but we still have a long way to go, and that's HIV/AIDS. And so really, and I'd like to invite Cesar Antonio to join us. This is a challenge that is, as I said, both heartbreaking and heart-rendering, but there's also great promise, I think. And as we work more at trying to address HIV/AIDS at its root causes, that drives more of a focus into where are the risks, and where is the risk of increasing infection, where is the risk of vulnerability, and that gets you into looking at populations and disaggregating information by gender, by locale. So the more we try to get smart about dealing with this phenomenally devastating health challenge, the more we drive into local decision making. So I'd like to invite Cesar Antonio Nunez Zuniga, who is the Director of Latin America and Caribbean for UNAIDS. I happen to be housed in the AIDS office at State Department. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we do, but UNAIDS is such a great partner with our efforts, and I'd like to give the floor to Cesar Antonio to talk about the Fast Track Cities Initiative.
Thank you so much, Larry, and thank you everybody for being here. Yesterday when I was having lunch, somebody says, what's UNAIDS? And it's, well, we work with HIV and AIDS. What are you doing here? Well, we also work with cities. And my presentation about Fast Track Cities Initiative, it's a partnership that UNAIDS and IAPAC, and I have to quote here my colleague Jose Zuniga, who couldn't be here, President and CEO of the International Association of Providers for AIDS Care, the Municipality of Paris, which is the original partner, and of course UN Habitat, our host today in this meeting. And the idea here is that, yes, we have made good strides in terms of the AIDS response all over the world, but as we said last year, we need to fast-track the response, and that's what's behind this initiative. Let me see. Okay. I'm going to try to move around because I see several screens in the room. And so, again, it's been 35 years of the epidemic, and sometimes we debate about how many people have died or how many people we need to treat. It's important for the decision makers to know where the next 1,000 new infections are going to take place in order to tackle them and prevent them. It's, many of you who are 35 years or younger, you have lived with HIV all of your lives. How can you contribute yourselves from the perspective of where you are in the cities to put an end to AIDS by 2030? We have heard about the Sustainable Development Goals. Number 3 deals with health, 3.3 deals with HIV. Cities, as we have heard in several sessions in the past few days, account for 6% of the population of the world. And now we're talking about an aging population of HIV. I believe that an integrated approach, we have heard about resilience to climate change in the previous sessions. We also need to have cities that are resilient to the infections of not only HIV, we need to have data also on how to respond to the emerging infections. Look at what happened a couple of years ago with Ebola. It was supposed to be contained in a particular area of the world, and then we ended up with cases in the United States, in Europe, and so on. And we had to jump really quick at responding it. Now we're dealing with Zika, and this is going to continue. Cities need to create and establish, if they don't have yet, data information systems to better analyze. Going back to our partner, the city of Paris, and Mayor Ana Hidalgo, Mayoress, we had this Paris Declaration. Yes, earlier Alicia quoted the Paris Declaration that was signed back several years ago. This is a brand new one, 2014, and the idea is that the major cities should fast-track their response. There is a potential for cities to be really game changers. And at the moment, I believe that just in the last presenter, when I like your slides, when you were looking at the SDGs on a city-by-city basis, the cities identifying which of the objectives are the ones that relate to them. Now, tracking indicators, that becomes an issue, and I believe that's what I'm going to continue with. This is what we're proposing with the Fast Track Cities Initiative, a web portal that will include information from cities that are a part or members of this initiative. And we would include not only the political commitment from such cities, but also information related to the targets. One of the key targets for the fast tracking has to do with the 1990 treatment targets. We need to have, by 2020, identified 90% of the people who live with HIV, treat 90% of those, and the 90% of those in treatment should be with undetectable viral load. And that's something that needs to be monitored on a regular basis. We have seen reports of cities in Europe, a couple of them, that are close to reaching that target. In the Americas, you may have heard that Cuba last year eliminated mother-to-child transmission, and that it's monitored very closely. They are also working very hard to reach their 1990 targets. Our platform of Web Portal looks at showing what are the lessons learned from the cities that are already moving ahead on that. This dashboard goes from the generalized or from the global picture to the city picture, where we would have more targeted, more specific examples of what's going on in that particular city. And this is a city deeper dive, where, as you heard earlier, Alicia Bárcena was referring to how we use smartphones, how we empower people to share the data. We would know about stockouts. We have heard in the news people living with HIV complaining about stockouts. This system will allow us, with raw data, granted, to identify where we are, and decision makers sitting with affected communities be a part of that. This is the system that we would like to see community have access to. Alicia Bárcena has referred to the Principle 10. Principle 10 comes from the Rio 1992, not even the Rio Plus 20 agreements, where it empowers the community. We need the communities on board, making decisions side by side. And in the HIV arena, we see youth engaged a lot in this dialogue, the intergenerational dialogue that needs to take place, so that the community tells the decision makers, the planners, on how to move on. Four principles that are part of our exercise. I'm not going to go into them. You can check them out in the website. And just to emphasize how this partnership is moving forward, we're happy to be here, Larry, and I know PEPFAR has also an important platform, and I'm sure that cities will benefit from these approaches. I'll stop here.
Muchas gracias, Cesar. As I mentioned, I happen to come from an office at the State Department called the Global AIDS Coordinator office, and we coordinate a broad interagency effort that brings significant resources to the table globally in the fight against HIV/AIDS. If I can call up my second presentation, the fight against HIV/AIDS is something we've made significant progress. There's still a long way to go. I don't have the, here it is. So one thing that we've realized in our efforts is that it's really critical to make the best use of data possible. Let's go a bit. I see. Okay. So putting data at the center of decision making, to find the most vulnerable populations, to find the smartest interventions, to make the best possible impact on the spread of this devastating disease. That is a top priority for our office. And just this week, we took our data dashboards, our open data dashboards, and took it to a new level of greater granularity. It's an effort called Panorama, and just yesterday it was announced. The data that is currently available as of yesterday goes much deeper to local level, to identify populations in cities and identify important data points that are relevant to the fight against HIV/AIDS. And that's the main thing I wanted to talk about today. But two other things just very quickly. We have an initiative called DREAMS. I mentioned that the effort to end HIV/AIDS has to be sensitive to gender issues, because the most vulnerable population right now in sub-Saharan Africa are young girls. So the DREAMS initiative envisions, and it's a partnership that helps girls become determined, resilient, empowered, AIDS-free, mentored, and safe. Well, one of the things we're doing with DREAMS, again, is putting a focus on data to bring that gender disaggregation to the table and to identify the best possible interventions to particularly target efforts to protect young women and girls. We recently did an innovation challenge and issued a number of grants that are focused on harnessing data for this effort. The last thing I want to talk about, and just really quickly, this is a demonstration project in Tanzania. We were working, State Department, PEPFAR program, and the Millennium Challenge Corporation, another U.S. agency that does development. Well, this is a partnership between PEPFAR and MCC in Tanzania to build that data ecosystem and nurture it. And one of the things that is critical to this focus, we recognize in our mission to address the spread of HIV/AIDS and put an end to that spread, that we've got to work across multiple sectors. So we're looking at gender issues, we're looking at education, we're looking at economic growth, which is the MCC's core mission. So we're working together and looking across numerous SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, to see how we can build data capacity at the national level in Tanzania, but also at the local level, looking across these multiple sectors. This Data Collaborative for Local Impact Project, we've set up a lab in Dar es Salaam that, again, is building that data ecosystem, connecting government, statisticians with entrepreneurs, with NGOs, but we've recently taken it to local communities. So we have a new project that is in the works that will be taking this effort and building data capacity in a number of local communities across Tanzania as a demonstration effort that we hope others can model their efforts after. So that's really all I wanted to talk about, and I am really pleased right now to turn the floor over to the next segment, the next panel. Lee Schwartz is our Chief Geographer at the Department of State and the engine behind the Secondary Cities Initiative. Lee, tell us what that's all about.
Thank you very much. So I'll take the clicker. Larry? Sorry to be hovering there, but I promised the organizers I would bring this session in on time and on budget, so I'm going to do my best to make that happen. I'm going to switch it around a little bit. If people over there want to move, I think you get a much better view of the screen because you can't really see it from there. And I'm going to try to talk from back here so that I can actually see the screen. I won't be walking around, and you won't be distracted by me and the microphone, and you'll be looking at the presentation. I also speak out easier without the microphone. Can anybody hear me? No? All right. So first of all, I want to introduce our team. I have Laura Klein. She works in my office at the State Department, the Office of the Geographer and Global Issues. We have a division there called the Humanitarian Information Unit that focuses on data organization and dissemination on complex emergency issues. We also have Faith Sternlieb. She's a postdoctoral student at Colorado State University. They are our chief academic partner on the project and our principal investigator. I also want to acknowledge the fact that we have a strong partnership with the State Department's Bureau of Oceans, Environment, and Scientific Affairs, and that we have a number of implementing partners, chief of among whom on the projects we're working on today are the American Association of Geographers and EcoCity Labs, which is managing many projects in South America. So related to the new urban agenda, I'm glad to see that a lot of the presentations today were not only talking about the importance of data, but the importance of mapping that data, about visualizing the information, because I'm a geographer and I'm all about maps, but maps are more than just pretty pictures. They harness the power of data. They enable us to tap into the data revolution. And ultimately, you can manage your own environment better if you have more information in an open and shareable format. So what are secondary cities? They're rapidly growing urban areas. They're areas that are not very well examined. They are poorly mapped, or they lack mapping capacity. They are usually regional hubs of development of some sort. And we define them by function, not by size. So in China, obviously, you have secondary cities that are very large compared to, say, Central America, where you'll have a secondary city that's quite small. The specific project that I'm going to talk about is working with local partners. We discovered that it's always a good idea to start at the federal level and get federal governments involved. Once we have their buy-in, we then work with local governments, and we try to have a partnership between local governments, between NGOs in the local areas, and with universities. We find that universities tend to be islands of stability in a world that's rapidly changing, particularly for developing the types of tools of my trade, the tools of geography, geospatial science, and mapping. So the project, as we've designed it, is just entering its second year, and we're hoping to be able to sustain it for multiple years. We take a collaborative approach. It's citizen-based mapping. My view is that you can better understand the local environment only by listening to the people who live there. I'm the chair of a human geography working group in the United States. We have a worldwide version of that. And the philosophy there is that you need to enable people to map their own social and cultural milieu because they're the ones who know their own human geography the best. So we have 13 human geography themes that we work on, with the idea being that you can map from satellite imagery and other tools. You can map features that are visible, roads, buildings, waterways, but in order to enrich it with the social content that you need to understand a place, and geography is all about understanding place, you really need to get local content. And so we design our projects so we let the local partners choose precisely what human geography themes, and it's a pretty broad brush, so we're not limiting people. You can study education, you can study land ownership, you can study health issues, but it's very important that we do this in a collaborative approach with the local partners. So here is a diagram of our approach. We start out with satellite imagery, and we extract the physical data we can get from an image, and we map it digitally onto an OpenStreetMap platform, so it's free and openly accessible to everybody. And then once the features are mapped, we then work with the local populations and the local communities to add more content to those features, and we present it in a way that it can be understandable and visually compelling. So this session is about data. So I had to present our diagram that shows, of course, our project in the center of the universe, a little bit biased. But you can see how we link in with a whole range of different partners. Some technical partners, local communities, global communities. We are platform agnostic in terms of the type of platform we use or that our partners use to host their information, and also in terms of software development. If they want to use open software, we encourage that. If they want to use proprietary GIS software, we try to enable that. The results of the project, we are trying to hit on all these topics that are related to sustainable development goals, resiliency of the population, better preparedness for disaster, enabling local capacity. Sometimes the capacity is already there and we just want to foster it. Sometimes we need to create it in areas that don't have the capacity. We have open geospatial solutions, so we provide a toolkit for analysis and not just showing data. And the end result is more resilient, sustainable, and better mapped cities. Our first project, our pilot project, was actually in a neighboring country here in Cusco, Peru. We have representatives from our embassy there who helped initiate that project. And this is the database that we have all of our data loaded onto. It's called a GeoNode. It follows the provenance of data very effectively, so you can track each data point as it's put in. You have metadata that describes where the data are from. And then you have many, many layers of data. When this snapshot was taken, there were 458 layers. Now I think we're probably close to 1,000. And this project chose land ownership, water supplies, and risk as their themes. We have a website that hosts all of the data. We also have a story map format that Laura and Faith will show as we move forward. And this is the website. If you log into the internet, you'll see this map of our projects come up. These are the current projects that are underway after 1 year. And you can see secondarycities.state.gov is the website. And I'm going to turn this over to Faith now. Thank you.
Okay, so Medellin is about 2.44 million inhabitants. It's basically the second largest urban agglomeration in Colombia, aside from Bogota. And with 9 neighboring cities, it covers about 3.7 million people. It's experiencing rapid change, increasing population, and unplanned development. So we're also, or some of our goals in Medellin are to foster local capacity in geospatial technology, which is common among most projects, and also compile and disseminate existing geospatial data. We're also doing some mapping, some change detection mapping. This is a map of Medellin and its growth. I think the animation did not work. Essentially, though, the red is 2015, so, and the blue is from 1986. So this is all of the urban growth that Medellin has been experiencing in the past 30 years. And I'm going to hand this over to Laura.
Do you want just to advance for me? Okay. So the next slide will introduce you to our secondary city in Pokhara, Nepal. Pokhara, Nepal is, as he mentioned, secondary cities are quite different sizes around the world. Pokhara, Nepal is only about 260,000 folks. And they are experiencing almost a 7% growth annually. So in Pokhara, Nepal, Nepal, of course, is very risk-prone for earthquakes. And so we partnered with a local NGO that we could look at applying lessons learned in geographic data in collecting geographic data for emergency preparedness. Next slide. To do this, They have partnered with a wide variety of stakeholders, from the local government to national military, police, first responders, the local Red Cross, Boy Scouts, even groups of bicyclists, to put their city on the map, to map the buildings, and then, of course, to map the important facilities in their location, the schools, the medical, the government buildings, even the religious sites, because then they'll be able to use these sites and plan that these will be locations where folks will evacuate to during a disaster, and where they can plan to get aid to in a very rapid manner. Faith will introduce our next. Sorry. You want to do that? Okay, so Kharkiv is another one of our secondary cities. It is the second largest city in Ukraine. It has a population of about 1.45 million people, and it is basically it's the second largest city in Ukraine. The ongoing border conflict provides the context for which to collect human geography data on vulnerable populations. Next slide. One of the mapping techniques that we're doing is going out into the field, with our partners and collecting data for vulnerable populations. This map, you can see a photograph of stairs. This is the entrance to a public building. And basically, they've collected all of the points around the city where there are stairs and no ramps for people with disabilities and women with carriages, for example, with children. They've also collected attributes on each of the points. So each point has a photo and attributes that are assimilated with that photo and those problems. And then our final example of a current project study that we have ongoing right now is in Cusco, Peru. As Lee's already mentioned, we started working with them almost a year and a half ago now. And one of the issues, while it's a fascinating tourist location, to maintain a lot of this architectural charm, I know there have been a lot of challenges to the local populations and the residents there. So they were interested in looking at the waste management issues for the residents in certain neighborhoods in the city. Next. To do so, they have been going out and mapping and doing surveys to identify where the waste was collecting, what types it was, and then also looking at environmental quality indicators that the waste might be affecting, such as water sampling points. With that, that's our short vignette of our current projects, but we'd like to hand it back to Lee.
Thank you. So I'm going to close by announcing I'm very pleased to be able to say today that we've just chosen our newest secondary cities project, and it's right here in Ecuador, Esmeraldas, Ecuador. It is the first project of year 2 of the secondary cities project. As I mentioned during my remarks earlier, all these projects are chosen with the cooperation of our embassies and our science, technology, and health officers, and I'm glad that Ambassador Chapman has arrived to point to the importance of that connection that we manage. And a few things about the city, just to make you understand the process, is that we don't decide what the topic that is studied ourselves. We let the local participants decide. In Esmeraldas, it was rather fortuitous that, at least for mappers, there was an earthquake in April of just this year. And they were able to, in short time, through satellite digital mapping, map a lot of the structures to show damage assessment before and after the earthquake. This gave us a very good physical base with which to work. So that part of the digital open data were already available, and so our task was to choose the thematic areas of interest that we would work on. And a number of them have been identified. Access to water and sanitation is an important feature. Local fishing, they're trying to build up the fishing industry and shrimp fishing as well. Housing and building more sustainable housing in anticipation of potentially earthquakes. And I want to mention that we have a strong partnership already we've developed with the University in Esmeraldas as well as the University in Quito. And I want to take the opportunity today in closing to introduce our partners. We have the mayor of Esmeraldas, that is Lenin Lara Rivadeneira. Thank you very much. And we have Professor And a professor here in the University of Quito is going to work with the University in Esmeraldas, Professor Carlos Mena. So I'm very pleased that they could come, and I congratulate you. Thank you very much. So I'm not sure. I think I brought us in time. If anybody has any questions they want to raise, or if they want to maybe stay afterwards and talk with our local partners, that would be a great opportunity. So thank you very much. Larry, do you want to say any closing words?
Sure. Thank you very much, Lee, and congratulations on such phenomenal work. The Secondary Cities Initiative is really phenomenal. We actually were expecting our head of delegation to come and close. I'm not sure if she's here yet. If I might just take a minute to recap where we've been this morning. As far as I'm concerned, I hope you all agree, this has been a phenomenally rich discussion. And really, what it does is highlights the potential that we have to work together in partnership. Partnerships are key to this, but partnerships amongst various stakeholders, citizens, governments, local governments, national governments, etc., to harness data for sustainability and for achieving our new urban agenda. So without more, I'm just really pleased to introduce Nancy Stetson, who is our head of delegation to Habitat 3 and the United States Global Food Security Special Habitat 3.
And Special Representative for Global Food Security. I have a lot of hats, so pick which one you want to hear from. Good morning. It's great to see all of you. Thank you for being here. How's the event been going? Are you enjoying it? Okay. Well, it's kind of weird to come in when you haven't been at the event for 2 hours and tell you how great it was, but that's what I'm going to do, okay? Implementing the new urban agenda, and excuse me for reading off this, but I seem to have a lot of things to say these days. But as you know, implementing the new urban agenda and achieving the sustainable development goals in our cities and communities is an urgent and complex task. You have a very short air in Ecuador, so I need to take a couple of breaths. I just ran up 3 flights of stairs, so bear with me. We believe that Habitat 3 gives us an opportunity to learn from and exchange innovations with one another as we set out to do this work, giving us valuable global context. But the actions that must be taken, as we all know, are inherently local. Our cities are places where we come together in increasingly close quarters and large numbers. This means that challenges like eliminating hunger, fighting disease, ensuring quality education and jobs, building resilience to climate change and natural disasters are concentrated and overlapping. There's a wealth of human potential and ingenuity in our urban landscapes. Our cities are crucibles of invention and opportunity and wellsprings of innovation, cities where problems are solved. To ensure that no one is left behind, we need to make smart decisions, informed by the best possible information. We must identify and prioritize our challenges with clarity, target our actions to the most effective solutions, find new ways of solving problems, and empower our citizens to be part of the solution and to hold governments accountable. To make these smarter decisions, what do we need? We need data, good data, reliable data, and comprehensive data. The United States has been a proud sponsor of a number of data initiatives, and I'm particularly proud, putting on my food security hat, of 2 examples that I want to share with you. First is called Project 8. Project 8 is a platform built to aggregate, synthesize, and visualize all data surrounding food security, agriculture, and nutrition. It has a social networking component to allow those working on no staples, Julia. Sorry. To allow those working on food security data to collaborate and work together. The platform is up and running and being used by hundreds in the food security community. And what's exciting is that by aggregating all this data, we're not only going to know what we know, but most importantly, what we don't know. And in the case of cities and food security, we don't know much. We know there's hunger and malnutrition in cities, but we really don't know the level. We don't know where it's located. And Project 8 is going to help us answer that question. A second initiative I want to talk about is a project we're doing with Stanford University. And Stanford University and it has to do with predicting both poverty and food insecurity in a totally new way by using satellite imagery and machine learning to examine subnational data. We're eagerly awaiting the results of their experiment and look forward to sharing this unique data collection method in the coming months. We've seen this morning in the event that you've all participated in how data can be a tool for making sure no one is left behind. We've taken a close look at how data can help address specific problems facing our cities and communities, like building resilience to climate change and working towards an AIDS-free generation. I want to congratulate the cities of Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Oakland, California, as well as groups like Geocensus and others that are lending their support to the joint resolution on harnessing the data revolution for climate resilience. And I encourage other cities and organizations that are represented here to endorse the joint declaration this week. We've also taken stock of how different kinds of data can be aggregated to provide deeper insights into the challenges facing our cities and potential solutions. We focus particularly on how geospatial data, for example, can be mobilized as a tool for urban sustainability in medium-sized cities. And at this point, I want to congratulate the city of Esmeralda, Ecuador, for joining the Secondary Cities Initiative. Mayor, come on, come on. I think our mayor is with us. So thank you. It is great. And we wish you success in serving as our model for deploying geospatial data for sustainable urban sustainability. Thank you, Mayor. Great. Finally, we've taken a close look at efforts of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. We've explored how cities and communities can tap into an emerging global ecosystem to help make better use of data to solve local sustainability challenges. I urge all of you who are here to learn more about the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. Consider using the partnership's data roadmap toolbox to help chart a course for filling data gaps and building capacity for data-driven decision-making. I also encourage you to explore how the partnership's digital marketplace can connect you with expertise and resources to help you harness the data revolution to achieve your sustainability goals. In conclusion, the challenges you face are complex. They're interconnected. The good news is that the data revolution is already here. The private sector is using it to make smart investments. The academic community is using it to study problems and identify potential solutions to bring us to scale. It's up to all of us to harness this revolution and to put it to work for all of our citizens in advancing urban sustainability. Thank you. And sorry I was late.
Ambassador Stetson, thank you so much. Let me just conclude with an additional thank you and applause to all of you, and a brief couple of announcements. First of all, there are still materials on a lot of the things we talked about on the table outside, including copies of the joint declaration on harnessing the data revolution for climate resilience. We'd love it if you're from a city, an organization, a company. We'd love to have you just indicate your support, add your name to the list. It's really simple. Esmeralda, you're in? Awesome. Millones de gracias. Okay, so thank you. In addition, I just would like to mention, if you get a chance, go up to the exhibit space. It's kind of a a hike to get there. It's up a hill. You have to go through security again. But if you get there, go to B59. Exhibit booth B59 is a U.S. Booth in partnership with Esri, and it's all about data for urban sustainability. There will be presentations. I'm going to give a talk there, a little bit more deep dive later this week on the Global Partnership Toolbox. We also have another exhibit, the U.S. exhibit, which is E99, I believe, which also has a lot of information. So I'd like to encourage you all to take a look. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Mayor, thank you so much.
Muchas gracias. Permítame romper el protocolo, pero creo que el momento es especial para Esmeraldas. Yo quiero agradecer de manera definitiva al Departamento de Estado, al embajador que nos ha visitado en Esmeraldas, ha permitido también, ha facilitado que Esmeraldas hoy día sea incluida en el programa de ciudades secundarias, por supuesto, al trabajo desde la Academia de la Universidad San Francisco. Y ciertamente el desafío es inmenso. Creo que por eso motiva el hecho de que pida intervenir en este espacio y poder comprometer y poder reafirmar nuestra visión de que aprovecharemos al máximo, en beneficio de la comunidad esmeraldeña, esta posibilidad que hoy día se presenta desde el programa de ciudades secundarias. Esmeraldas tiene muchas necesidades. Esmeraldas ciertamente se inscribe en el marco de las condiciones de la selección de ciudades secundarias, ha tenido un crecimiento demográfico muy alto, no planificado, lo que ha significado también que buena parte de la población aún no cuente con los servicios básicos, más elementales, si se quiere. Estamos trabajando precisamente por transformar esa realidad. Esmeraldas también tiene una situación importantísima en lo que corresponde a su acción geoeconómica. Es uno de los puertos más importantes, el primer puerto petrolero del país, y también como región presenta una gran oferta turística. Partimos de una realidad que es la que debemos transformar. Si buscamos en las guías turísticas más importantes del mundo, nos desaconsejan el visitar Esmeraldas. Pues esa realidad también la vamos a cambiar. Estamos trabajando en lo que es precisamente entregar servicios básicos, mejorar los niveles de servicios, la infraestructura, la seguridad y por supuesto también constituirnos en ese referente turístico que la bondad de la naturaleza ha entregado a Esmeraldas. Yo además agradezco públicamente al embajador Todd Chapman que ha tenido presente el hecho de que Esmeraldas debe constituirse y puede desarrollarse en armonía como sociedad resiliente. Fuimos golpeados muy duramente, muy severamente a inicios de año por las inundaciones. Luego tuvimos el terremoto mundialmente conocido que afectó principalmente a las provincias de Manabí y Esmeraldas y de las cuales todavía tenemos aquellos rezagos. Vivimos un proceso de réplicas, cuasi terremotos, durante algo más de 6 meses con algunos sismos que superaron y que se acercaron a los 7 grados en la escala de Richter. Pero quiero decirles que estamos de pie como esmeraldeños y agradecemos esta posibilidad, esta decisión de escogernos, de visualizar como en el programa de ciudad secundaria y la vamos a aprovechar al máximo. Muchas gracias.
Sí. Bueno, sin más, señor alcalde, Ambassador Chapman, Ambassador Stetson, Lee, all of the panelists, every one of you who have participated, thank you all very much. Let's harness the data revolution for urban sustainability and keep it going. Thank you.